Thank you. All right, just a bit about me. My name's Anant. I lead engineering at Included Health. I worked at Uber and LinkedIn, both companies pre-IPO, post-IPO, and so that's what I like doing. A quick update on what Included Health is. It's a health company that is, or a health tech startup that's bringing data and technology to change the standard of healthcare. That's a picture of me and my wife. We love hiking and traveling around, so just a bit about us. I'm here to talk to you about what does it mean to thrive as an engineering leader, or actually a leader in a startup. What I realized as I was doing this, though, was thriving means very different things for people. And so I tried to put this into a framework that you can apply for how you want to think about it. The way I think about thriving is the alignment between your values, your strengths, and the areas of growth. Values for me are things like, what do you value next in your role? And you may say, look, I value integrity, passion, and like those are true. I've rarely found people say, I want to work at a company that doesn't have high integrity. So think of these things more as things by which you would filter. So value might be like, look, I value working at a mission-oriented company. That is a thing that I really care about. Or I value working at a growth company, or where I get to grow in my roles, or compensation's important, or what have you. Strengths are things along the lines of what are you top 10% at? We all have things that you would say is you are really frigging good at it. And it is important to find that alignment because then you get to leverage your skills in the way that you want them to show up. You also get to show up or show off the skills that you have, and like you also feel recognition and feel good about it. And the final is, what are the things you want to get good at? This doesn't mean you're bad at these things. You may be like, look, I am the greatest video game developer on the planet. I want to get better. A role or a company where you get to do all three of those, that is what thriving means. And so for my purposes, I think of thrive for, this is my view of thriving. And the reason I also say that is because if you're like, look, for me, thriving means I'm in a role where I get to have fantastic work-life balance, or I get to get paid ridiculous amounts of money, or I have fantastic brand recognition, some of my content here may not be as relevant to you, and that's OK. So some parts of this would be, is, as you listen to my talk, ask yourself some of these questions. And my goal is to have you think about some of these questions for you. Oh, did I go one too far? No? OK. Oh, sorry. So the first lesson, I guess, would be is be at the right place for you. And so this is my definition of thrive. For me, things that were important is I wanted to work at a mission-oriented company. That gives me personal happiness and satisfaction. I wanted to be in a spot where I get to grow and also work with people and change the world in a meaningful way. That's what I like doing. I love working at startups because they're disrupting an industry. They're disrupting the way we do things, and that gives me personal happiness and satisfaction. Top 10% strengths. Now, this is kind of awkward to say, like, oh, this I'm the best at. I don't know. This is what I think I'm good at. Which is building teams, building organizations. You may have different things for yourself. And finally, what are the things you want to get good at? If you find that mix and find that thing that lines up with you, you're going to be able to see, like, is this the right company for you? So, wait, this is really weird. I'm having some trouble, but I think I can work through this. OK. One element of this would be is you may find that you want to be the greatest game developer on the planet. Your company doesn't do those things for you. That may not be the best spot. So as you think about, are you at the right place? Are you at the right company for you? You want to find that alignment. If you find that alignment, it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be a lot easier. The second thing is when you're working at a startup or a pre-IPO company, lean into these challenges. One part, as I think about, like we all have choices that we make in a company. When you join a startup, you're seeing some of the problems for the first time, or you're making those trade-offs. You may choose to say, I want to have future reward. Hey, like a startup is going to give you equity in that company, but you're going to lose certainty. You may say, like, look, I want to have greater autonomy because, hey, like I get to work on a small company, small team, work faster. You're going to have a lot more ambiguity and a lot more things that are going to be missed out on it. So the advice that I would say here is think about what are the startup you're in, the company you're in. There are certain sets of trade-offs that you're making by being in that spot. Lean into those challenges versus fight them. I will sometimes talk to managers who will have the conversation, which will be, Anant, in my next role, I want to have a strategic impact to the company. I want to have to be able to define company strategy, vision, all of those things. Awesome. 5 minutes later, Anant, what does success look like for me in my role, and what do I need to do, and tell me exactly why this company will be super successful. Those two things might be at odds. Now, that doesn't mean come in, join step 1, step 2, question mark, step 3, profit. It might mean that you are leaning in to those challenges, not fighting them. The examples that I might pick would be companies at different stages are going to give you different sets of challenges. If you join an early stage company, you're probably looking at a world where you are going from a 0 to 1. You're trying to figure out how do you build, how do you get product market fit. If you join a mid-stage company, you have sort of product market fit, and you're trying to work through and saying, like, OK, how does this product scale? Or if you're at a late-stage company, you do have product market fit, and you're figuring out how does it scale into multiple different verticals. You're going to get different amounts of growth in those things, and it has to line up with what you want to be working on. As an example, you join an early-stage company, and you're upset that the company doesn't have product market fit. You can fight that and keep saying, why do we not have it? Or lean into it and say, I am going to solve it. On the flip side, you may also realize that is not a challenge I want to solve, so then you're at the wrong place. So go back to step number 1. Find the right company, find the right role. The other element is startups go through their growth and journey. When I was at LinkedIn, LinkedIn did this project called Inversion. What the company actually paused for a few months to rethink the technical architecture and technical stack. That was a big deal, but it was actually one that actually propelled the company to be quite more successful. Same thing happened at Uber, where we had this project called Darwin, which was, again, trying to break up the monolith that Uber had and trying to move faster with this. The same thing is happening at Included Health. I say that not to say that all startups are the same, but to say it's like depending on when you join, what company you're at, what space you're at, you're going to face different sets of challenges. If you don't like working in a monolith, chances are joining an early stage company is going to be very difficult for you because they start off as working in a monolith. If you want to work in a company where you get to define the architecture, break apart that monolith, don't join a first early stage company because you'll be fighting the business. Join a mid-stage company or later stage company where they are going through that journey and seek those things out. The next lesson, I kept this blank mostly because it really ruins my punchline of my lesson, so I'll talk about this, which is when you're at a startup, there are always going to be a series of choices you make. I am sure each and every one of you will probably be thinking about, not even a startup, in your role, in your teams, you'd probably think about, oh my gosh, I could do this or that. I can do this feature or that feature. And like, I'll give a few examples of this. When I was at LinkedIn, we had acquired this company called Connected, fantastic company, which is looking at how do you connect, as their name says, connect. Like, how do you build better connections with your members? That product was built entirely in Python and Django. LinkedIn's entire tech stack was all in Java. What do? Do you rebuild all of it in Java? Or do you ship it faster by trying to figure out how do you integrate into your stack? When I was at Uber, I was leading the mobilities org, and one of the choices we had was, do you build your own bikes and scooters, or do you go partner? Realizing that building your bikes and scooters is a very capital-heavy, capital-intensive business, but partnering up, you kind of circumvent that, but whichever company you partner up with, they become big and dominant because of how much Uber's reach would provide. And also, there's not many companies that operate at Uber scale. And finally, at Included Health, we've had some of those challenges too, where the market and the industry is moving way faster. Health tech is booming like crazy, but we also are trying to figure out how do you keep up with the technology in our systems, and how do you keep up with that? So do you press your technical advantage in market, or do you take a moment to pause and say, let's rethink our entire tech stack and work through it? What if there's a different way? What if you thought about those problems differently, which is, instead of looking at a lot of these problems as an or, think of them as an and. And the idea is not just do it all. Like, that is not what I'm trying to convey. It is to have you think about the and so that you create a different set of choices. Two things that you may look at, say, these two things are mutually exclusive. They may not be unless you change a different set of variables. And so at LinkedIn, we thought about, OK, what if you could rebuild parts of it in Java but ship faster? And so the way this would show up would be is at LinkedIn, what we did is we actually integrated the UI while we started building the data layer on the LinkedIn stack. This allowed us to learn a lot faster, but in doing so, also make progress against our tech stack behind the scenes. There was a trade-off here still. Like, this was not the fastest path to do either, but it was the right compromise and trade-off. Uber, for example, partnered up with Jump and Lime Bikes to sort of validate the business model and work through it. So, and again, there's different choices, different trade-offs you make. At Included Health, we are now looking at this and saying, like, how do we unlock our business to be able to move faster, as well as be able to address some of our technical challenges, break apart our monolith, build up the new tech stack. And so we're looking at saying, that can I invest faster on the AI and orchestration pieces that unlocks value for the business, while still also rebuilding and enabling some of our infrastructure behind the scenes to be able to grow and scale. So the advice that I would have is make the and when you do, you'll be set with a different set of choices. Again, the point is not this is the right answer, like do it all. It's the choices you make. As an example, like a lot of times when I, again, engage with managers or leaders, they'll talk about, look, I want to hire faster, but I also want to keep my bar high. I can't do both. You could. You have to look at it differently. What you may have to do is, in order to keep your bar high and hire faster, you may have to pay more. You may have to invest more in branding. You may have to invest more in brand recognition. Random story was when I was at Uber early days, I had to reach out to people and say, hey, have you heard of this company, Uber? Or my grandmother would say, why are you joining a taxi company? That's a challenge you're leaning into at an early stage company, because that's tricky. But you don't want to compromise on the bar or the technology or the people that you want to bring on. So find the and that is how you would be successful. And so for me, the advice here would be is thriving in startups isn't about dodging trade-offs. You will always have trade-offs. It's about finding the or, changing the and to an or, changing the or to an and then you'll have a different set of choices. And I can assure you, more often than not, the different choices ends up being a lot better along the way. The final lesson is invest in people. And each of you is like, oh, yes, of course, mind blown, I agree. But there is a reality behind the scenes, which is that one of the challenges of a startup is you cannot hire people fast enough to keep up with what you want to do. Each of these startups is not trying to solve, like, startups are trying to change the world, and it's hard to change the world when you have fewer people, but that's the idea. You're trying to take on big things. I think about LinkedIn when it was trying to take on companies like Indeed or Monster.com, Uber, which is trying to take on the taxi world, or Included Health, which is trying to take on the entirety of the healthcare ecosystem, which is massive. Like the US, for example, spends over $4 trillion on employee healthcare. I cannot change, or we cannot change that unless you have the right people, unless you've invested in those people. The other part, and this is where the engineering side comes into me for me, is like engineering is a point of leverage within the organization. It cannot turn into a coin-operated machine, otherwise your startup would not succeed. And the sooner you start thinking about it that way, the sooner you start building against it, it'll be more effective. But I'm also not here to give you the most basic advice that each of you would say, of course I totally do this. So let me try taking something a little bit more controversial. This, by the way, is my point of view, so you may disagree with me, and that's okay. That's not the point. The point is for me to give you my perspective. There's different types of leadership styles. A lot of the times, I'm sure if any of you have done an engineering manager interview, you've been probably asked this question: what is your leadership style? I got asked that question a lot of times. And there's multiple different styles. I put in three of them here. Oftentimes, I would always answer servant leadership, because that's what I knew. Like, that is what I had learned, and it also seems like the cool thing to say. And everyone is like, oh, yeah, servant leadership. And that's, by the way, oftentimes what your reports want to hear, too, because they're like, oh, yeah, my boss cares about me, he's going to work through it. I'll take a stronger stance and say, no, don't do that. That is not, at least from my perspective, and I'm intentionally picking something controversial here, is like, it is not a strategic style. Servant leadership style depends on the people in your team having a point of view of what success looks like, and you doing that to making them successful. Transformational leadership style is You have a point of view on what the company needs to be successful, and you inspire and motivate people against that vision. It is a different way of approaching leadership. Again, I'm not going to do a whole course on transformational leadership here, largely because of time. But I encourage you to think about what is the leadership style that resonates with you? What is the leadership style that matters to you, not necessarily the leadership style that you've either been told your former leader has done, or the leadership style that you think is cool. And there's plenty of literature, plenty of books against this. For me, when I think about transformational leadership style, it is that I'm here to create a step function change in someone's career. And that step function change would take them from where they are to where they need to go. And so the important element behind that, though, is you have to hire effectively. And so much like how I started the talk, which is find the job that is right for you, you need to hire people who are aligned with the values that you hold true for the company. What are the strengths that you need to leverage and the areas that they need to grow in? If you find that, transformational leadership style is going to resonate with people. Because can you imagine a world where someone's like, look, Anant, I want to be a great engineering leader. And in a role where they get to practice those things, and you have a mentor and a coach who can help them be successful at that, that is what makes it super fun. And so, if I may, the 4 learnings that if you could walk away or take away from this would be is, first, be at the right place for you. This is actually probably one of the most important things, at least for me. One part, and I realize I have some extra time, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent. In terms of being at the right place, what I typically see is people, when they try to pick the right place, they're based on either comfort, hey, I know someone there, therefore it's going to be great. Competence, they do Java, I know Java, I will be really great. Or extrinsics, this company is using the coolest technology. They're going to look great on my resume. They're paying me a ridiculous amount of money. They're giving me a awesome title that feels like growth for me. Those are all very legitimate reasons to pick a company, so I'm not trying to dissuade you from that. But that's very different than if you're picking a company based on a set of principles. If, for example, you have decided that I want to learn to run my own business, that is my dream. And if Jeff Bezos reaches out to you and says, hey, do you want to join my company? What are you thinking about? Are you debating what title you're going to get? Or are you going to look at, this is an opportunity that is unique for me? And so the reason I say that is because when you're at a pre-IPO company, you are on that journey, you're on that growth. If you want to thrive as an engineering leader, it is essential that you think about, is this the right place for you? Once you have that, lean into the challenges at that company. It is going to be messy. Startups are chaotic. Startups are not perfect. But that's what you're there for. You're there to make a difference. You're not there to spot problems. You're there to solve those problems. The third piece is make the and. There's going to be choices where you will see that you'll have exclusive opportunities. Look at the and chances are you will find a better path. You'll have to make different choices. So again, not saying you have to do it all. It is you'll have different sets of trade-offs. So anytime you come across a problem, there's only 2 paths. Find the and. And finally, invest in people. And what I would say is find the leadership style that resonates with you. For me, the style that has always resonated and that I enjoy, and that's why I like working at pre-IPO companies, is transformational leadership. So that's my talk. Thank you for listening.
Wow, this is an incredible talk. I wish you could create a course and we can all attend this course. QR code for Slido is right here, but I do want to start with some of my own personal curiosities about, I've worked at startups as well. I've worked at Uber, pre-IPO, and so I have a question for you. As a leader, how do you deal with failures at a pre-IPO startup?
There's a lot of them. Okay. So one part is like, how do you define failure? And I'm like trying to go meta on that front, largely because failure can mean a variety of things. The way I think of this is failure is where you did not learn something that from an action that didn't help you move forward. Now, there are failures, like I think about, I would pick Uber as an example, where I was like, oh, we should do, there's a bunch of products we wanted to launch. A lot of them did not work out. And some of those you could look back at and say, you probably should have figured this shit out before. Like, that is where I would look at myself and say, I failed as a leader, because there's a lesson there, and I failed because I should have seen that coming. I should have figured it out. each one, as in life, you learn, you move on. Don't make the same mistake again. Take like everything you do, all the actions you take on, there's a pro and a con. The best part about a startup, though, is you get to practice those things differently. The rate of failure and the rate of success is a much disproportionate one. The Uber example, if I may give, would be is like I had joined Uber. There was a time we did 100 million trips. Like a few months later, we were doing 1 billion trips. 6 months later, we did 2 billion trips. The magnitude and the rate at which this company was growing gave us so many more opportunities to learn and grow and practice those things that each time around, you build something better. Each time around, you learn something new. And so that's what I would say in a startup world is you will make mistakes. It's OK. Reflect on them back in the future. That's probably the other thing.
Yeah. That's great answer. And my second personal question that I have is, I think in startups, it's common to say, we don't really have time to ... And so with building leadership, that's one of the things that people, like startups, don't really have time or resources. So what are some things you do specifically to build people? Some examples.
Yeah. So one part would be is think about the company you're joining in, and does it make sense? So I would very much agree if you're like if I'm starting my own company tomorrow and I'm starting to build stuff, I'm not going to invest as much time in leadership development for people because I'm like, this product's not going to work in the next 3 months. Like, let's go, let's execute. That's leaning into the challenges that you're joining in. For us, I think it's a realization, and a very deeply held realization, which is the company will not be successful unless we grow the people within the organization. The way you grow people is going to happen through the leaders within the organization. Included Health is about 200 engineers. I cannot personally coach every one of them. The way that happens is through leaders on the teams. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and one of the things he talks about is leadership is not a rank, it's a choice. And so what we sort of focus in on is who are the people within the organization who want to learn and grow? How do you help them through that? Within that, though, is one of this notion of like, how do you grow? What is your learning style? We learn through school, which is go through a lecture, take notes, do homework. But I'm guessing for a lot of you here, if I were to ask you, how have you grown as a leader? Most of you would probably say, oh, I did it. I practiced. I did things, and it helped me do better. Now, there's also some of you who will say, oh, I had a great mentor. I had a fantastic coach. That's also true. And then there's probably going to be some set of you who might say, I read a book, and that book blew my mind and changed the way I think about things. It's that combination of those three things that we think about. So within Included Health, when we think about growth, we think about, OK, what are the things you want to get really good at? So you may say, look, I want to get really good at motivating, inspiring my team. Do you get to practice those things? And are those in alignment with the company? So if someone came to me tomorrow and said, my dream is to be the greatest game developer, I would say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. But what I can help you is how do you think about engagement? How do you think about product delivery? And if those things line up, you should be here. If not, it's not the right fit. The second piece is, do you have a believable source or coach? So as you look at the things you want to get good at, are you working with people who will coach you, mentor you, and are they good at what they do? So the reason is the consciousness that creates the problem has to be greater than the one that solves it. Or the one that solves it has to be greater than the one that created it. And so look around the leaders that you have. And so for us, we also spend a lot of time when we interview you and bring you in, the leader you're going to report to, the manager you're going to work with, is a critical, essential part. And finally, obviously, declarative books. I will send you a long list of books that you may want to read. My personal favorite most recently is What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz. Highly recommend that book, but it really talks about culture and how that shows up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to dive into the Slido questions. And the first question is from Ben. What do you mean by operating engineering as a coin-operated machine?
Yes. So a coin-operated machine would be we need to grow the business by 10%. Engineering needs to grow by 10%. Oftentimes, as leaders, we get across these challenges or issues. It's like, how much, the market right now is a bit different, but usually it's how much headcount do you need? The push, I would say, is think about how do you create leverage. And it's really hard, especially earlier on in my career, I used to think about the way I grow is by the number of people that report into me. Now, each one of us on paper would say, oh, I would never believe that. And I would also say the same things. But that's not how you felt in that moment. And that's a very important thing. And so the piece I would say is coin-operated machine is you don't want it to just be give me more engineers, I'll produce more stuff. Give me more engineers, we'll produce more stuff. find out and figure out how do you create more leverage within that organization. It might mean your team is not the right team to be building these things. It might mean the platform team needs to be building things. It might mean that you do something scrappy to learn something faster. There might be different ways to work through that. It's more so the flexibility and agility behind that.
Thank you. The next question is, what are your go-to tactics for different stage startups? Can you also share a situation as well?
So my experience is going to be a little bit limited. I largely work in companies that I think are going to go public. So I like pre-IPO companies that have found product market fit and are sort of going through that growth and scale phase. And so that's what I like doing. That's what I enjoy. So I am inherently boxing myself in that spot. So there's that. But what I would say is, what are your go-to? I think, and by the way, the reason for this is I think if I were to do an early stage company, that's too risky. Like it's not my risk tolerance. It may be for you. So I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing those things. I don't. Maybe we talk about this one-on-one. I would love to understand more context behind this question. But really, it is my go-to tactics for me is like what I like doing is working at companies that are going through hypergrowth and scale. If you're doing early stage, you're probably doing much more like iterative, like quick product deployments to learn faster, which is cool. And if you're a larger stage company, you're probably leaning more towards servant leadership. So maybe if I were to use this leadership model, I would probably pick servant leadership for large post-IPO companies because you're much larger and working through this, and more like authoritarian top-down leadership at like a Series A or smaller company. Transformational is probably in the middle, which is pre-IPO, post-IPO world, but you're in the company that needs to scale forward from there.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. After leaning in, how do you get motivated or motivate employees when the company is going through growth phase? So I guess that goes in to the transformational leadership style.
Yeah, so this is hard. Motivation. So I think the theoretical answer to this question would be is like, well, if you've hired correctly and if you have the right alignment, it makes it easy. There's probably truth in that. But it is hard not to ignore those things that happen, right? Like, I mean, within healthcare, also you'll see SaaS sort of come through it. It is more so spending time in building trust with the people on your team. Like, what's the data? What do you see? And sort of working through that alongside of it. For us as like Included Health, like you would say is like, gee, I can't talk about any of these things. Okay, I'm gonna move on. But Uber, when I was at Uber, there was a lot of those challenges where like you saw a lot of negative news and things like that, and those were hard. I think being an authentic leader goes a long way in that. And you have to find that balance where you're not creating more FUD in the ecosystem for your teams. FUD means fears, uncertainty, and doubt, but also being authentic. And so my one advice to this would be is put your own oxygen mask on first before you put it on for others. If you are not as motivated through it, you will not be able to convince others to be going through it. If you do get to the other side, like sharing that and working through that with your team will go a long way. The other element of that, I just don't want to get leaked on, but the other element is going to be is, again, if you have that alignment between mission, strengths, and areas of growth, it should work out. And that's that journey. Every startup, a startup is not always going to be roses and rainbows. You're going to go through this. It's a non-linear growth. Helping people through that, the growth and all those things make sense. And by the way, sometimes it may not be a fit. And being comfortable with that conversation is also a big part. If someone was like, look, if you have a manager who's like, look, the way I want to grow is by running a massively huge organization, and your company is not growing, be honest about this. Don't try to do the, well, you know, in 5 years we'll grow. Like, be honest, and it may work out for you.
Yeah, I can plus one to everything you said. Having experienced Uber at the same time as you, I think it was very important for managers and leadership to validate the experience of. And that's how you keep like also them motivated, right? It's like you validate it. It's like, hey, we're not growing as much right now, and this is the current situation. All right, let's move on to we have time for one more question. Any advice for when transformational energy isn't inspiring for a certain group of people?
The question is why? Like, why is it not inspiring? Because sometimes the way you are echoing the transformation may not be the way they think about that. So that would be my advice. Like, I'll try to understand why is it not inspiring? Why is it not connecting with them? There will be times where someone might say, look, this is not for me. I'm actually very comfortable in my job. I'm not looking to grow. And grow might mean like lowercase g versus capital G, which is like, I'm trying to do the incremental growth. Having that honest conversation is probably what I would say. But try to understand why. Sometimes you may be speaking a language that does not resonate. So for example, I work at a health tech company. There are folks who are motivated and passionate about the mission and the ability to make an impact to millions of people. There's some folks who are like, oh, no, tell me about the technology challenges. Help me understand the tech. There's other folks who are like, no, I want to understand how I'm going to think about scale, and I want to understand working at a pre-IPO company, like financials and all of those elements. Try to understand what is it that you're speaking, and is it speaking the same language as someone else?
Yeah, get to know your people, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for right now. Thank you so much
Thank you
for all your
Appreciate it.
insights.